does more schmoozy time while the assistant is actually doing the work time and not schmoozing. Hi, I'm Camille. Today I am going to talk about being an assistant editor. And for a change, I'm not talking about editing English, I'm talking about actually editing film and video. So two different kinds of editors. This is the film and video kind. An assistant editor's job might vary from project to project, but basically anything the editor doesn't want to do, the assistant editor gets to do. Since I did this in the olden days, most of my knowledge is based on when movies still might have actually finished on film and when digital editing was not 100% the workflow, but it was the main workflow at the time. But some of my knowledge might be a little bit out of date because of that. So I'm going to maybe make some assumptions about how things might have changed by now. Otherwise, just assume, I'm basing this all on a while ago technologically. So things could be different now, but this is what I did when I was an assistant editor. So on a movie, there's something called dailies, which is the film or video that they shot during that day. So the first day of editing begins very close to the first day of physical production, so that as soon as the first set of dailies are ready, the assistant editor has the job of making sure that they're all loaded into the editing computer and are ready to go. So a lot of assistant editors for the first several weeks while the production is still being filmed will have to work night shifts. So in the olden days, you would get a tape of the dailies, whether they were shot digitally or on film. And then the assistant editor would also get some discs that went along with it. So you would load the tapes in and the discs and make sure that they were in sync. The discs provided all of the shot frame information. So if you've looked at a frame of dailies film, you might notice it has each shot, each frame of the film has a very detailed exact number, so that if you give someone that number, they know exactly what frame of film you were talking about. So all of the dailies need to be loaded in, and the assistant editor needs to make sure that the computer is correctly recognizing the numbers associated with each frame of film. So probably now, if everything is all digital, you can just load everything in at like 1:1 res, so no compression at all, and edit that. So it's not as important that you can go back and trace exactly where each frame of film came from. But when you had to cut a negative, you needed to make sure that you were cutting the right negative in at the right place. So that's something that may have changed now, but if something is still finishing on film, it's very important that is shot on film and finishing on film, it's very important that these numbers are accurate, and the assistant editor's job is to make sure that they're accurate. So until the shoot is finished, then that's the main job of the assistant editor. Once the shoot is done, and the editor will start working like the next day, which is why the next day after the shooting starts. So that's why the assistant editor works at night, so that the editor can come in on day 2 of production and can come in at like 9 o'clock in the morning and not have to come in at some weird time. They can come in at their leisure and everything will be ready for them to go. So once the dailies are done, then the assistant editor might change to a more regular daytime standard kind of schedule. So then what they do is entirely dependent on the editor. The editor might ask them to string some scenes together, might ask them to organize the files in the system, might ask them to get them coffee, I don't know. Whatever the editor needs, the assistant is there to help. When I did this, I worked at a post-production company, so being an assistant editor was one of my jobs that I had to do, but it was not my only job, so I only did that as needed, so I can't really speak to how full the days are for an assistant editor when that is their only job and they're working on one project. Sorry. But hopefully I can give you an idea of what it's like to be an assistant editor. So while the first assembly is going on, the editor might ask the assistant editor to do some of the assembly work so that they can focus just on the more nuanced feel of the edit and picking different takes. So again, during that whole production, or that whole main editing part, the assistant editor just does what they're told. Once the first cut is done, then it becomes the assistant editor's job to make sure that everyone who might want to see that cut or needs to see that cut gets access to it. So this could be hosting screenings in the editing room where the assistant editor kind of runs all the equipment and the editor comes in with the director and the producer and does more schmoozy time while the assistant is actually doing the work time and not schmoozing. Or the assistant could be asked to make DVDs and help get those to like a post coordinator who would then get them sent out to the people who need to see the DVDs. I imagine now they might also be responsible for somehow setting up a screening via the internet where they can just work on getting the materials uploaded to a secure website and then access given to people who need to see the cuts of the film as they're going along. An assistant editor might also be asked to help like an actor with their reel. So you might be asked to make a copy edit of the film and go through and just cut out the scenes that a specific actor appears in and make sure that that actor is given a high quality copy of their scenes for their reel. An assistant editor might also be asked to pull film clips for the EPK, which is an electronic press kit. So that is the copy of behind the scenes footage or a trailer, interviews with cast, scenes from the movie that get sent to various news outlets all over the country. So when they play a clip of the movie, this is where they got it. So the assistant editor might be told, okay, pull us these clips and put them on a thumb drive for us so we can put them in the EPK. On projects that finish on film, the special effects process can be a little bit different than on digital projects, but regardless of how the film is done, when the special effect is done, that comes as a separate piece of media. So the assembly that the editor has done might have green screen sections still in it. It might have digital opticals that will need to be done by an actual film lab. So once as the special effects or opticals are done, the assistant editor will replace them in the assembly of the movie, putting them where they go and making sure that they line up correctly and look like they're supposed to look. So that's something else that an assistant editor will be asked to do. Once a film is locked, this becomes one of the most tedious and important jobs for an assistant editor. Is you will work on the edit decision list. So this is if it's finishing on film, or maybe if there's going to be something called an online session. Sometimes when you're editing, you don't have enough storage, or your computer doesn't have enough power to work with everything at full resolution, so you work on something that's at a lower resolution, and then once it's locked and done, it has to be rebuilt from the highest quality materials available. So in the case of film, that's film, and in the case of digital, that'll be your digital masters. So the assistant editor goes through the final cut of the film and this list of all the in and out times of every single shot and makes sure that the numbers are correct, so that when this is sent to the film negative cutter, who is actually physically using scissors and cutting your film negative, they're cutting the correct film in the correct place. So it's rare that a computer would make a mistake at this point with the edit decision list. Still, the assistant editor needs to verify every single shot in the movie. And if there is a mistake, it's likely because something went wrong at that first part when they were loading the dailies in, and there was an error there with the computer recognizing what the numbers were associated with a particular piece of film. I got this by interning, which is usually working for free at a post-production company, where I told them specifically when I got the job, the internship, that I wanted to be an editor. So the post-production company had me do a lot of different things while I worked there, and one of them was learning the editing software and becoming an assistant editor. I only worked for free for about a month before they decided that I was contributing enough. They felt guilty not paying me. I did not get paid great, but I started getting paid. I really didn't understand the work, the differentiation between what work I was doing as an assistant editor, as a trailer editor, or as a post coordinator at the time. So I was working on loading in dailies and helping an editor on a feature film, and this editor was grumpy and not fun to work with, and so I went and asked if I had to do this work for him, or if there someone else was available who could handle it, or if he could hire an assistant. And I was told I was his assistant and I had to just do whatever he wanted me to do and deal with it. So I had no idea I was being an assistant editor at that point, so it was a little surprising to find out I was. If you know someone who is an editor, you can ask them if they'd be willing to let you assist them on a project, or be willing to sit with you and help you learn some editing software. You should definitely get some editing software on your own and work on learning it. I edit my videos in Adobe Premiere. I think Adobe Premiere is a pretty good system to use. I learned on an Avid Media Composer, and that's not too different from other editing systems like Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere. They're all basically the same. So the only things that are going to be different are like the shortcut keys. So as long as you have worked with some software and you understand the basics of what a timeline is, and different video tracks and audio tracks, and how to manipulate and move things around, add some simple effects like dissolves or titles or black frames, then that's a good start, so that if you want to answer an ad looking for an assistant editor, you're not going in knowing absolutely nothing. You've got a good basis of some editing software. And if you can pick up software fast, then you'll be able to adapt to whatever editing software they might be using. Assistant editing can either lead to just assistant editing, or you can aspire to be an actual film editor. Some editors are more encouraging than others, and will even give their assistant editors not just, oh, assemble this for me to work on tomorrow, but will say, you know, why don't you work on this scene? See how you do editing this whole scene, and I'll review it and sit with you and we can talk about what changes I might like to make. So if you find the right editor, they can be like a mentor to you to help you get from assistant editor to editor. Otherwise, being an assistant editor is a good job to have on its own. You don't necessarily have the same pressures as an editor. You have different pressures than the editor. But I think it's fine to just remain an assistant editor. You should maybe also look into working on some student films if you want to get some experience, they're going to be either low pay or no pay, or they'll pay you in food and a credit on the film. So that's a great way to do a lot of production and post-production work and get into it and meet people, because not everyone who works on student films is just starting out. There might be some professionals there, and if you do a good job, they might ask you to work with them on future bigger projects. It's good for night owls. If you don't mind working long hours, unfortunately most production and post-production jobs involve long hours. An assistant editor will be working alone a lot of the time in the dark. So, you know, if you're scared of being in a building alone in the dark at night by yourself, then maybe don't look into assistant editing. If you're fine with that, then this could be something that works for you. You won't always be working at night, but a good number of assistant editor jobs are looking for people who are willing to work at night, so you could have a leg up in getting more work if you are interested in working at night. You'll need to be organized, because you will not only be loading all the dailies into the editing software, you will also need to organize them once they're in there. You can't just hand over the computer to the editor and say, here's 500 files, enjoy. You need to sort of organize them. Oh, this is this scene, this is this scene. Give maybe some different names to the files or organize them in folders. So you need to have a good sense of how to organize things to be an assistant editor. You'll also probably be doing a fair amount of tech support. If anything doesn't work, the editor or director or producer is going to turn to you and say, fix it, fix this computer. So when I was working as an assistant editor, I spent my first couple of years on the phone with Avid tech support a lot. By the time I left that job, I could troubleshoot almost everything that went wrong with an Avid by myself. I was able to disconnect an Avid and move it into another room. So, you know, if you like computers and tech kind of stuff, then you will get to do quite a bit of that as an assistant editor. You should also have an easygoing personality and not take things too personally when an editor is rude to you, because they will be rude to you. I don't know how else to sugarcoat it. Editors get angry and are unhappy people, in my experience. So they're going to take a lot of it out on you. Don't take it personally. I'd say the biggest downside to being an assistant editor is just that you are an assistant. You're not considered a very important person, so you're likely to either be treated poorly or just sort of ignored, overlooked by people. Even if you have good ideas to contribute to a project, no one cares. So you have to be willing to just sort of stand back and assist. If you're too pushy and wanting to sort of tell people who have a lot more experience that you have ideas that they might take as you saying you know better than them, they're not going to be open to that. So just stand back and assist. The pay can range from literally nothing to really pretty good. If you can get into the union and work on the highest paying union jobs, you will be doing pretty well. I did a quick internet search, and the union starting salary for an assistant on a big studio movie is a little over $2,000 a week. Because it will be in a union, there will also be protections that non-union projects won't have as far as abusing your time. So a union project is going to have restrictions on the number of hours you can work in a row, how many hours you have to have off between shifts, how many hours you're supposed to be given for meal breaks and stuff like that. And if those things are not respected, it's usually you get a financial compensation for that. So if you can get a union job, you'll be doing great. If you can get a fairly steady non-union job, it's not going to pay as much as a union job, but it should still be a fairly decent wage. Probably it's going to be a salaried thing and not an hourly thing, which is just the reality of how it goes. And so if you can get yourself booked most of the year, you can earn a good living as an assistant editor. You'll be working probably from project to project, so there could be some stretches of time where you have no work, and you know, if you're in union and you're making $2,000 a week, that makes that more palatable. But if you can manage to line up one job after the other, then it's a decent wage for some interesting work. If you have any questions about what else I might know about being an assistant editor or about any specific projects that I worked on as an assistant editor, feel free to ask them below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you can see all my videos about all the different kinds of things that I like to talk about.